Welcome to my channel, where manga and anime stories come to life in audiobook form. Here you'll find manga-inspired adventures, anime-style fantasy, action-packed battles, dark mysteries, and emotional story arcs. From powerful heroes and crazy plot twists to supernatural worlds and unforgettable characters, there's always a new story waiting. If you've ever said just one more episode at 2 a.m., you'll fit right in. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Salvatore Argento, heading to Quest Academy, correct? Yes, you may enter. Salvatore smiled at the uniformed attendant who lifted the velvet rope. Sal, hurry up. Salvatore Argento, Sal, stopped in front of the door of the luxurious carriage following his parents. Sal shifted his gaze to the turrets mounted on top of the carriage. Each turret was ready for operation, rotating at regular intervals to maintain an omnidirectional defensive posture. Turning his head forward, he met his father's eyes. He was looking at Sal with a meaningful expression. Don't worry. This train is the safest mode of transport heading to the Academy. I know. Sal turned to the left to see the barrier. The red light barrier that prevented the intrusion of monsters. The train was scheduled to increase its speed and offensive power to pierce through that barrier and break through to the next safe zone. Before the monsters could react, that is. Once all passengers had boarded, the train doors closed. Shortly after, to prepare for departure, reflective shutters slid down along the train's outer walls. As the surroundings darkened, Sal hurriedly blocked his vision. Ugh! He hurriedly turned his head before his own reflection could be cast, but the headache had already begun. Whenever he saw people suddenly, or if there were too many of them, he suffered from headaches. This curse-like, his ability was special, but because it sometimes activated regardless of his will, it felt like a curse more often than not. Standing far ahead, his father looked back at Sal and smiled encouragingly. Avoiding it isn't the answer. It might be good training. He pointed to his own eyes. His silver irises were shining brilliantly with mana. Sal's eyes were the same silver as his father's, but the resemblance was only in appearance. His father's ability was an excellent one that maintained the current Argento auction house, but it was vastly different from Sal's ability. Passengers, this is an announcement. The train will depart shortly. For your safety, please sit down and fasten your seatbelts. The red zone section we will soon enter is expected to take less than 5 minutes, and during that time, you must not move from your designated areas. This train is bound for Quest Academy. Sal looked up immediately when his station was mentioned. His parents looked at Sal simultaneously, but their expressions were completely different. Pride filled the face of his father, Pietro. On the other hand, his mother, Sophia, was struggling to suppress her worry. Sophia finally stepped forward holding Pietro's small bag, and the long sigh of relief she exhaled brought Sal's mind back. The luxurious private cabin was splendid enough to compensate for the long wait. It was equipped with plush interior decor and even a private bar. Pietro walked inside, shouting his order to the waiting bartender without hesitation. He began flipping through television channels himself via a nearby control panel. His eyes were busy searching for the channel he wanted. Got it, Hunter Network. Before Sophia or Sal could even sit down, breaking news resonated through the cabin. Sal sighed inwardly. These days, everything was breaking news, and his father's generation, which had suffered the most damage from monsters, was addicted to listening to such news. Initial rift occurred on 5th Avenue. Grade 2 monster vampires and prowlers have been sighted. The Recovery Guild Paradox has dispatched a response team, and residents are asked to stay in their homes until the evacuation team arrives. According to our analysis team, if this rift spreads and 5th Avenue is lost, the territorial loss rate for this quarter is predicted to increase by 4% compared to previous records. Meanwhile, a class discrimination bullying incident that occurred within the refugee cruise Darwin is causing controversy, leading to demands for system reform. More than 60% of refugees who responded to the survey stated they would rather risk danger on the mainland than live painfully in a protected floating fortress. The stance of government officials on this matter has not yet been announced. This coming week, Quest Academy welcomes a new batch of trainees. Thousands of students will flock from nearby districts to compete for official admission qualifications. The introduction of a formal education system for heroes is a matter that the United Guild Alliance has long demanded, aiming to discover new talent and shorten the training period. Pietro silently spun his chair around, pointed a finger at Sal, and smiled brightly. Then he leaned his head close to the television, straining his ears as if trying to hear better. To think my son is entering the academy soon. I'm an adult now. An unexpected reaction returned to his playful joke. Along with a small gasp, a voice was heard from the other side of the cabin. Academy? Isn't he bluffing? Who would dare bluff about the academy? The 3 members of the Argento family simultaneously looked at the girl who was serving drinks. She was staring at Sal with her eyes wide open, as if seeing him for the first time. About 0.5 seconds later, she beamed at him and focused on preparing the drinks again. Sal burst into laughter at that sight and slightly raised an eyebrow at his father. If it weren't for mandatory registration, I would have thought you were trying to send me far away. Pietro waved his hand with a smile still on his face, insinuating that there was a grain of truth in those words. Even so, his eyes rarely left the screen where the news continued to flow. The recent artifact exploration operation has been a huge success. This is the 8th consecutive achievement, as the Specialist Guild Delvers defeated a Demon Realm portal and returned after recovering high-grade weapons and equipment. Shade, the Guildmaster of the Delvers Guild, released the following statement. I am confident that this is the best achievement in our history. While many people are awaiting the appraisal results, the Argento auction house is not disclosing specific details about the secured artifacts. In addition, they refuse to answer questions regarding casualties that occurred during the operation. Meanwhile, public opinion regarding the Delvers Guild is worsening. Along with criticism that they are recklessly driving heroes into danger, their lack of cooperation with recovery guilds and pushing back the front lines is being pointed out as a problem. Pietro stopped smiling, stood up with a frown, and took the small bag from Sophia. Even the news is rushing us. Can't we rest even for a day? On the day Sal enters the Academy, he looked at Sophia, and she nodded as if she found it ridiculous. Just as Pietro was about to open the bag, he glanced at the attendant who was slowly making drinks and smiling at Sal. Best achievement in history, what nonsense. Pietro muttered as if spitting it out, clicked the bag, opened a few times, and lifted the lid so Sal and Sophia could see. Could you take a look, son? He turned the bag to show Sal. Sal unconsciously activated his ability. As his silver irises began to shine, his appraisal ability activated, and all the details of the item unfolded before his eyes. Name, unidentified gloves. Origin, portal artifact. Age, unknown. Grade, uncommon high. Size, 8.5 inches in circumference. Material, prowler leather, unidentified, terrible cloth. Attribute, unknown. Ability, phase shift steel. Power source, external essence. Evolution potential, none. Quality, worst. Durability, 8%. Estimated value, $14,000 to $35,000. Let's see. It's part of a torn cloth armor. It's on the verge of breaking. I see rune patterns. They look quite powerful, but they aren't complete due to the damage. Originally, it might have been rare or epic grade, but now it seems to be barely uncommon grade. Mother, can you restore it? Sal asked, looking at his mother. Sophia looked at the item carefully, but before she could speak, Pietro closed the bag. Good analysis, but we can't waste your mother's essence on this. She might collapse trying to restore it. A higher version of the restoration skill is needed for a complete restoration. Shade only requested an appraisal, and we only need to do that much. He pushed the bag aside, took the drink handed by the attendant, and smiled brightly. Passengers, this is an announcement. The train is currently entering the red zone. Please strictly follow all safety regulations until the next announcement. Passengers violating safety regulations may face severe measures, and antisocial behavior will absolutely not be tolerated on this train. Your safety is always our top priority. Sal sensed the urgency in the announcement. What exactly does antisocial behavior mean? At that moment, the entire carriage lurched roughly to one side. Thud, thud, keek. Sal gripped the armrest of the chair tightly and looked at his father without a word. As dull mechanical impact sounds rang out at regular intervals, the two looked up at the carriage ceiling simultaneously. Are the turrets firing? Pietro nodded and gestured for Sal to fasten his seatbelt. He and Sophia also fastened their seatbelts immediately, and the attendant also sat in a bar seat to secure herself. Kayak, kahik. Despite the numerous defensive barriers and soundproofing, Sal could clearly hear the inhuman screams coming from outside. Soon, a mechanical whirring sound from above resonated down into the cabin, and Sal felt the vibration transmitted to his seat. Through the sound of the subsequent rapid fire, he could sense that the firing direction had shifted to the other side of the train. The shelling continued for several minutes, and finally, the turrets went silent. Sal hoped it was because all the monsters had been killed. He couldn't be sure whether the turrets were merely a deterrent or actual lethal weapons. Isn't the speed of technological advancement slower than the speed of monster evolution? Is this kind of thing a normal daily occurrence for people who use the train frequently? While he was thinking that, applause and cheers erupted from the surrounding carriages. Everyone was rejoicing at having survived, and Sal realized he was standing in a reality completely different from the safe world he had lived in. Pietro unbuckled his seatbelt before the indicator light even turned off, earning a stinging glare from Sophia. Passengers, this is an announcement. We have safely passed through the red zone. Thank you for waiting. Sal held his breath and stood still. The defensive shutters were slowly lifting from the windows, revealing the scenery outside again. Before he knew it, they had entered a safe zone protected by a powerful barrier. Sal shot up from his seat and pressed his face close to the window. He looked back at the red zone, hoping to see something impressive. That expectation soon became reality. The carriages trailing behind were covered in green blood. The barrier blocking the red zone rippled here and there, showing that monsters were continuously attempting to break through. Pietro came to Sal's side and tapped on the glass window. He also followed Sal's gaze to the barrier and let out a long sigh. Paying taxes is worth it, I guess, though the amount is still unacceptable. He smiled at Sal and lightly grasped his son's shoulder. Were you nervous? Sal withdrew his gaze from the carriage and looked at his father. A little. It feels like I'm running away from reality. He looked out the window again. The receding barrier was getting smaller and smaller. Pietro sighed and pressed Sal's shoulder a bit harder. It'll be over in a few months. Just go in, live quietly, and if you fail, you can just come home. You can live while working with us. Sophia also approached from the other side and joined this conversation they've been sharing for years. Even in the worst case, you'll come to hate your ability less. If you pass the first semester, you'll take cool classes and maybe even make some friends, right? My ability? Sal wanted to shake his head and laugh, but his father's touch felt different this time. Pietro looked at his son with a serious expression and spoke quietly, as if reasoning with him. Don't worry about things that haven't happened yet. Just go and experience it yourself. Just remember that no matter what happens, we are always on your side. Sophia also nodded in agreement. After a moment of silence, Pietro beamed at his son again and said, Of course, if you manage to graduate, the whole family could receive hero tax exemption benefits. At those words, Pietro laughed heartily and plopped down onto the lounge chair. As Sophia rolled her eyes and sat next to him, Sal was left standing alone by the window. Even knowing the headache would come, Sal once again looked at his reflection in the window. My ability? At that moment, the reflection faded, and he began to see threads of power wrapping around his entire body like circuits. Sal used his ability to weave those threads into various shapes. He knew that if the correct combination was completed, he would awaken a completely new ability. Sal knew that this ability held infinite possibilities, but also that his body wouldn't be able to endure it if he copied an ability he couldn't control. Copying his parents' abilities to help with the auction house work was thanks to their careful teaching and efficient output. If I go to the Academy, will I be able to learn how to control my ability? Sal expected that if that could happen, his life would change completely. The next station is Quest Academy. Sal deactivated his ability and turned around. His parents were already standing in the middle of the room, and all his luggage was packed. Sophia smiled and shook her head. You should have woken me up. Whenever you use your ability, you look so peaceful and free of worry, unlike usual. So how could we? We didn't want to disturb you, for no reason. She lightly lifted both hands, as if to preemptively block Sal's complaints. Pietro put his empty glass down on the bar and pointed to the hallway they had entered through. He seemed about to leave, but as if remembering something, he put his hand into his coat's inner pocket. He took out an envelope and slid it toward the bartender. Thanks to you, we had a comfortable trip. The attendant opened her eyes wide and made a surprised expression. She seemed unaccustomed to receiving tips, but Pietro headed to the hallway, carrying a piece of luggage without even thinking of waiting for her thanks. Just as Sal was about to follow his parents out, the attendant spoke to him in a warm yet excited voice. I'll be cheering for you. I'm your first official fan. Good luck at the Academy. Sal left the cabin with a smile, but one question lingered in his mind. Why is a hero pretending to be a train attendant? Sal shielded his eyes with his hand as he got off the train. Since the surrounding high-rise buildings were all covered in reflective glass, sunlight was reflecting from all directions. It was hard to believe that this was a university campus. It was even more so when looking at the giant turrets mounted on top of the buildings. As Sal blinked a few times trying to get used to the light, Pietro spoke in an admiring voice. Isn't it amazing, Sal? Look at those buildings. Pietro pointed to the 5 skyscrapers surrounding them. Sophia and Sal nodded roughly at Pietro, who was endlessly excited and talking. Just then, someone who appeared to be an Academy attendant arrived. Mr. Salvatore Argento, I will collect your luggage. Sophia stepped aside and pointed to Sal's luggage. Yes, thank you. Do we need to provide a name or identification? The attendant shook his head and handed a card made of black metal to Sophia. This is the room assigned to Mr. Salvatore Argento. You will be guided through the subsequent procedures at the orientation held in the Central Plaza. He pointed beyond the high-rise buildings to indicate the direction they should go. Pietro moved the small bag he was holding slightly away from the attendant and said, This is fine. I will carry it myself. After exchanging a few nods and smiles, the attendant loaded all of Sal's luggage onto a cart and left. No turning back now, Pietro muttered as he playfully poked Sal's side. Sophia glared at her husband, then linked her arm with Sal's. Come on, let's go so we aren't late. We need to get good seats. Sal followed his mother's gaze and looked toward the train. Countless students were still pouring out of the carriages. Many of them were likely the first in their families to awaken an ability. Quest Academy was the first step on the journey toward wealth and honor for them. Some students stumbled, their faces clearly showing that the shock had not yet faded. In some carriages, the turrets installed on top had been torn off entirely, and there were carriages where the metal exterior was largely ripped open because the defensive barrier hadn't retracted properly. Sal wondered how they would repair that before departing for the next station. Instead of worrying longer, he followed his mother and moved his steps toward the plaza. There were a few families who had used the train's luxury cabins, but most of the wealthy class seemed to have arrived using private transportation. Don't you think that's a bit excessive? Pietro smiled, pointing at a luxurious private plane that was landing. Several airships were floating in the sky above, waiting for their turn to land. Most had similar designs, but a few boasted unique appearances as if they were custom-made. Sal agreed with his father's words. Having the means to enjoy the conveniences of life was good, but wasting resources on luxury that could be used to help people was behavior too detached from reality. Their family business, the Argento auction house, took on a social role by donating a significant portion of its profits to provide housing for refugees in recovery zones. Walking to the plaza, Pietro began to air his grievances again. Just one of those airships could settle dozens of families in the safe zone. And what about the essence consumption? How expensive must the cores needed for operation be? Sophia made a humming noise and shook her head. Then where do those cores come from? You have to hunt monsters and extract them yourself. So who would do that work? There's a reason those people are that rich. Even if they take a few cores, we need them to keep working. Let's ask the people directly. Do you hope the defensive barrier protecting you from monsters is properly powered? Or are you okay with the ultra-rich taking those cores for private use? Sophia raised her hand and pointed at Pietro. I know that the cores going into one private airship could run a train and help hundreds of people. Sophia's tone was taking on an increasingly weary edge. She added as if to finish the logic for both sides before Pietro could even speak. But, wouldn't more people be able to ride if we just got rid of the 4 high-class carriages at the front of the train? How are we any different from them? Which side are we on? Compared to those people, are we considered poor? Sophia pointed roughly at the luxurious airplane in front of them. Or do we look excessively wealthy in those people's eyes? This time, she waved her hand toward the group of people getting off at the very end of the train. Pietro paused for a moment, then abruptly changed the subject toward Sal. So, what classes are you thinking of taking? Sal burst into laughter and moved his steps toward the plaza with his parents. The area around the train station was truly spectacular. The platform was an artificial structure connected across several high-rise buildings, giving the impression of an aerial stadium floating between towers. Above it, private gardens, practical training grounds, and landing pads extended in multiple layers. Sal clearly saw an airship landing on a platform atop one of the skyscrapers. All of this was impressive, but nothing could dare match the view looking down over the entire city. The only structures more conspicuous than Quest Academy were the guild towers visible in the distance. They soared as if piercing the sky in varying architectural styles, and all those towers formed a circle, surrounding and protecting the Academy. Wow! Pietro exclaimed as if exhaling the moment he first saw the Academy Plaza. The plaza was in the form of an amphitheater, with thousands of seats surrounding a massive stage in a circle. It wasn't a structure that rose upward, but one that curved downward into the ground, and the stage was located at the very bottom of that curve. Sal followed the stairs down and found a seat. The wind was blocked thanks to a barrier, and small orange spheres floating between the seats were spreading warmth. Many seats were already filled with people, and Sophia waved her hand upon seeing familiar faces. Pietro continued to look around here and there, shaking his head, unable to keep his gaze still for even a moment, as if not wanting to miss anything. Sal's eyes swept the surroundings incessantly, as if overloaded. It was his first time in his life seeing a scene where so many strong individuals were gathered in one place. He couldn't know what skills they had or what abilities they used, but the streams of light flowing within their bodies were incomparable to anything he had seen until now. One of them had a light so intense that it practically covered his entire field of vision. Sal forced his gaze away from the streams and tried to calm the anxiety rising in his chest. It was one of many side effects of his ability, but he was used to handling it. After composing himself, Sal nudged his father, sitting next to him, and carefully asked who the person he just saw was. Pietro glanced in that direction, and a smile quickly spread across his face. It was dazzling like the sun, right? Right? Sal took a slow breath and nodded. Then Pietro gestured towards Sophia this time and continued. He says he just scanned Neuro with his eyes. Can you imagine what it was like? Sophia gave Sal a comforting smile and rubbed his shoulder affectionately. He's the strongest telepath in the world. But there's a rumor that his daughter is stronger. They say she's a mind controller. She looked around for a moment, frowned slightly, then rummaged through her bag and took out a small black case. Wear this. As the case was pressed into his hand, Sal sighed inwardly. I'm Fine. I can control it. I just won't look at people. Sophia silently closed the bag and placed it at her feet. The case was still clutched in Sal's hand. Pietro nudged Sal lightly, sending a look that said he should wear it. Whether it was for himself or a show of solidarity, Pietro took his own sunglasses out of his jacket pocket and put them on, smiling at his son. Only then did Sal feel a little less embarrassed, and upon putting on the sunglasses, he definitely felt much more at ease. Thank you, Mother. At that quietly murmured remark, the corners of Sophia's mouth turned up slightly. Ladies and gentlemen, heroes, and everyone dreaming of becoming a hero, welcome to Quest Academy. The orientation event will begin shortly, so please take your seats. Our staff are wearing white uniforms, and refreshments will be provided in a moment. Since sensitive content is included, please refrain from recording during the event. Thank you. Several drones floated above their heads, emitting a faint light. They seem to be verifying attendee information by scanning the audience one by one. At the same time, a small compartment smoothly opened from under the seat, revealing a portable device. The one who reacted fastest among the three was Pietro. He quickly picked up the device, scanned the document, and nodded as he spoke. It's a non-disclosure agreement. It's a common format, so don't worry. Sophia and Sal also agreed immediately, as if no further explanation was needed, and the screen soon blinked, displaying the full schedule and information to be covered in the orientation. Each item was interactive, and Sal began exploring the available classes with interest. Sal looked down at his device, scrolling slowly, and was surprised by the curriculum that was completely different from before. He had investigated the classes before admission, but the list shown now was entirely new. Sal pressed one of the master classes that had a solemn hero image on the icon. Then, a list of required prerequisite classes and grades appeared at the top of the screen, and each item was also packed with conditions. Pietro glanced at Sal's screen and raised an eyebrow. Isn't this a bit excessive? At that moment, without any warning, a massive circular screen turned on above the central stage. It was a structure designed to be clearly visible from anywhere in the theater-style seating. A moment later, names began to appear one by one on the screen, automatically arranged and displayed according to the seating position. Sal's name appeared on the screen, but his parents' names were not registered. The name displayed in the closest seat was a person named Christopher Gage, who was 2 seats away from Sal's spot. Sal leaned past his father and looked back, and there, Christopher was looking straight at him. Sal nodded with an awkward smile, but Christopher responded with a slightly puzzled expression. Only then did Sal recall the fact that he was wearing sunglasses in a dark space. Turning his gaze back to the screen, hundreds of names were quickly filling the spots. Meanwhile, Sophia was still manipulating the device, examining the class items. This is really too much, she said, looking at Pietro. It looks more like a military training camp curriculum than university classes. Of course it is. We are at war with monsters, didn't you know? The voice came from right behind Sophia. Sal looked back and saw an older man with a deep scar holding his son's shoulder as he stood there. Despite wearing sunglasses, Sal could tell that the man had absolutely no magical essence. However, a clear aura was felt from his son. Sophia nodded slowly, sending a somber look to Sal. I just hoped our children wouldn't repeat the pain we suffered. I didn't mean to offend you. She nodded to the man with a compassionate smile and turned her gaze back toward the screen. Here and there in the plaza, people would recognize Pietro and Sophia and wave. Sal was now hoping the event would start quickly. At that moment, as if responding to his wish, magnificent classical music filled the theater, burying all the chatter. Amidst the melody that sounded like a school anthem, a man soon appeared on the podium. A middle-aged man with a slender build and fading blonde hair looked at all the attendees with a warm smile. Thank you for waiting. I wanted to give you time to settle in and examine the curriculum sufficiently. As you may have noticed, we're going to do things properly without holding back this year. To explain the reason, I think I need to tell a little bit of my story first. I know many of you here well, but I'm very glad to see so many new faces here today. The rate of awakening is getting higher and higher, and the potential of the next generation cannot be compared to any generation we have experienced. Thank you for entrusting such a generation to our Quest Academy. My name is, well, you could just call me Questa. Quest's tone was friendly, and judging by the smiles bursting out here and there in the audience, he was clearly quite a well-known figure among the previous generations. When I first discovered my ability, I honestly thought it was useless. Identifying essence signatures. What on earth does that mean? In my head, well, it was like laws. Just by looking at the essence composition of a monster, I could know how strong it was, and since my colleagues also used essence, I could judge what level they were at too. As I continued to hone my ability, I began to see more and more things, and I was even able to observe how skills grow. So, I decided to create a structure that anyone could understand. That is exactly the system you know well. I assigned rules to what I saw and organized it into terms people could understand. For example, let's say I speak like this. The essence signature of one prowler was in this shape. Then it would mean nothing to you. Everyone sitting in the audience raised their heads simultaneously. Above them, an image of intricately tangled, pulsating threads was unfolding. It was a form extremely familiar to Sal. Sal was speechless and took off his sunglasses, trying to see it in more detail. It was the first time what he encountered every time he looked at people was reproduced so accurately. However, the headmaster was not finished yet. He turned his body stylishly and gestured, and the screen immediately switched to another image. This time, It was a scale indicating threat levels. But what if I say this? That is a grade 6. Then we finally know our opponent accurately. A clear reference point has been created. Then let's think about this again. If I can capture the essence signature just before a portal opens, wouldn't I be able to calculate when that portal will disappear? These concepts are exactly what I have studied for years and established as the system. As I did not stop my quest for knowledge, people began calling me Quest. My mission was to build a system that everyone could understand, and I believed that it would bring us absolute superiority in facing the army of monsters. Countless strong individuals joined my cause, and we established this educational institution. All current guilds follow the system. In this war, we are all on the same side. Quest paused for a moment, maintaining silence as if carefully choosing his next words. He looked up at the screen again. The screen that was displaying the list of names switched to an empty ranking board with a single snap of his fingers. The audience held their breath and focused on his every word. We have now developed a new technology that could completely change this world. But to operate that technology, enormous funds and resources are needed. Speaking honestly, we do not have that amount of funds. Even if we did, we would have to be very careful about how to utilize this opportunity. During my research on essence signatures, we discovered one possibility: the method of inscribing that signature into an internal core. Quest's face was full of excitement, and that heat was strong enough to be contagious to the listeners. However, the audience's reaction was mixed. Some burst into cheers, and that sound soon spread into thunderous applause. Even the confused audience members were swept up in the atmosphere and added their applause, and eventually, the circular auditorium vibrated like one giant festival. Thank you. But as I said, I want everyone to understand, so I will explain it more simply. This new technology makes it possible to artificially implant an ability into a student who has an aptitude for a specific ability. The lukewarm applause soon turned into massive shouts and enthusiasm. It was the most surprising news heard in recent years, and at this, many people smiled and shed tears. Sal could accurately understand the impact of this technology. The biggest limitation humanity faced in the fight against monsters was that abilities were granted randomly. Eliminating that limitation meant they could give the most powerful abilities to the most suitable students. Then why does our curriculum feel like a military training program? That is precisely to create aptitude for your children. We will maximize their knowledge and capabilities, growing them into ability users who can create real change in this war. Furthermore, this technology has already finished testing, and verification is also complete. Because the ability we implant settles at the level of an innate ability, students will feel as if they possess that ability from birth. This is the stage of completed mastery we have longed for over the years, and now we have achieved it. However, unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, this opportunity comes with a great price. We do not have enough resources to help every student, so we created a new system for the freshmen. The first semester at Quest Academy will be painfully difficult. Everything you achieve depends solely on your own efforts. Quest's words thrilled everyone here, but what shook Sal was the symbol Quest showed. That appearance of unfolding the vision he used to see right before his eyes. Sal thought he might have a similar or the same ability as him. Even if that wasn't the case, if it was Quest Academy, they would likely know how to control the ability. Whoa! Sal, turning his head at someone's low exclamation, realized that everyone was harboring overwhelming emotions. Maybe beyond control, I too could become a hero. There is certainly a way to rise to an advantageous position here, but nothing can be obtained without your ability and resolve. The status you currently hold inside this tower is meaningless. Family influence, wealth, none of it has any meaning here. All your progress will be closely observed by our faculty, and a final grade in class will be assigned at the end of the first semester. Heroes are not simply those who fight on the front lines. Defenders who protect the territory, controllers who dominate the battlefield, supporters who protect people, all of them are heroes. And when the classes and grades are decided, the top 10% of students will be permanently granted a new ability. Once again, welcome to Quest Academy. Sal's hands were trembling throughout the presentation. He was literally captivated, focusing on the headmaster's words. The presentation had ended before he knew it, and Sal stood up with his parents, applauding and cheering with his whole body as if his life depended on it. Though he couldn't put it into words, just looking at his parents' faces told him they were feeling the exact same emotions as him. As the thunderous applause subsided, Sal asked his parents, unable to hide his excitement. Did you see that symbol? The one shown on the screen when the grade 6 monster appeared. That is exactly the same as what I see when I look at people. Could it be that he and I have the same ability? Sal poured out questions without a moment to catch his breath, but his parents couldn't give a clear answer to any of them. Sophia shook her head as if surprised, but a smile lingered on her lips the whole time. It might really be possible to change the tide of the war. Sophia muttered, meeting Pietro's eyes. Pietro burst into laughter. But why give it only to students? Isn't it much more efficient to give it to heroes already running in actual combat? Sophia snorted, and Pietro looked at her in confusion. Sophia waved her hand and hurriedly explained. No, sorry. I just suddenly imagined you receiving an ability to go to the front lines and jumping into the battlefield. Pietro put on a hurt expression on purpose, but soon burst into laughter and stopped acting. Their joy was not just limited to the family. Other families around them were also talking excitedly about Headmaster Quest's announcement. But even in such an atmosphere, a few students were looking up at the empty ranking board with anxious expressions. Sal recognized them and felt mixed emotions. They say status or money is meaningless, but does it really have absolutely no influence? Announcement to all guardians and parents. Please attend the Quest Academy welcome event held at the Sky Lounge shortly. Please move following the guidance of our faculty members wearing white uniforms. Prospective students, please move to the dormitories immediately. Gray uniforms are prepared in each room, indicating that you are currently unaffiliated first-year students. After putting on a uniform, please report to the nearest staff member wearing a white uniform. Additional instructions will be delivered. Official orientation begins tomorrow, but your actions are subject to evaluation from this very moment. Good luck. Sophia opened her eyes wide, looking at Pietro with her mouth open. Sal turned his head toward his father, confused if he heard it wrong. But Pietro laughed refreshingly and assured him that it was all real. Before you go, hug me. Sophia's words sounded like a request, but were practically an order. Sal bent down slightly to hug his mother, who was shorter than him, but his gaze was chasing where other students were heading. But he had no idea where that location was. Are you listening to me? Sophia's voice pulled him out of his brief panic. Yeah, what did you say? Sal fumbled, as if nothing was wrong, and broke away from the hug. Sophia held out a black card. You can't go anywhere without this. She put the card in Sal's jacket pocket somewhat fussily. Go quickly and see if we can see you one more time before we leave. I really want to see you in uniform. Sal spotted a group of students gathered on one side, but they were all looking around with bewildered faces. Anxiety surged that he might not be able to find the dormitory properly. He stopped abruptly. Could this be a kind of test too? Seeing if we can find the dorms properly? Is this what they meant by monitoring students? At that moment, a staff member in a white uniform approached and tapped his shoulder. Student, please move to the dormitory. He pointed to one of the towers in the distance. It is over there. Sal felt slightly deflated inside. Thank you, he greeted quietly, inwardly cursing himself for overthinking. It was when he had taken less than a few steps. A black-haired girl with green eyes, biting her lip while looking around the crowd, caught his eye. Sal decided to help her. It's not a test. They said the dormitory is right over there. After pointing the direction with his finger, Sal passed her and walked ahead. It seemed he heard her cursing quietly. Walking a few steps ahead, Sal suddenly felt something was strange and slowed down. She caught up to Sal and glanced at him with eyes full of suspicion. The two didn't say anything for a while. Then she shouted someone's name and smiled with relief. Before Sal could react, the black-haired girl muttered, "Thanks." Then she ran quickly toward her friend. Sal suspected that the sunglasses made him look like a weird person. He took off the sunglasses and put them in his pocket. Walking for a few more minutes, Sal realized the platform was much larger than he thought. Although the towering skyscraper was visible in front, a considerable distance remained to the entrance. It's too far. Others seemed to have the same thought and started running one by one. Sal also started running after them. The competition had begun. Sal realized how out of shape he was compared to the surrounding students, especially compared to students with physical-based abilities. Move, I'm going first. Some student leaped 10 meters forward in a single bound from behind, and another student passed Sal at super speed. Students without movement-related abilities lamented or gave up. Arg, I wish I was a movement type too. It's a test for kids like jumpers and speedsters. An aspiring supporter like me can't keep up even if I try. I'd be grateful just to get into the top 500. At that moment, Sal tried to run too, but the result was miserable. Although he looked quite healthy on the outside, Sal was actually the opposite. Life just wandering around the auction house hadn't built up his stamina at all. By the time he barely arrived at the entrance, a line was forming as students checked the single map. Sal saw that speedster student and a few jumper students standing in front and was secretly satisfied that he wasn't that far behind. Already, a few students wearing gray uniforms ran out of the lobby as if bursting out and headed toward another tower. A while later, another student in a gray uniform ran across the hallway and out of the building. Sal cursed at himself for being complacent. A test element definitely existed here, but it wasn't finding the dormitory, it was arriving somewhere. Turning his head back to the map, Sal saw the black-haired female student making eye contact with him with an expression that said she had reached the same conclusion. She hesitated for a single moment, then spoke in a quiet but firm voice. "What's your name?" "Salvatore Argento." "What's your name?" Before Sal could ask her name, she disappeared from view. Some people standing in line screamed in surprise as they were pushed back by an invisible force. Sal suppressed the instinct to activate his eye ability. because he judged it was better to avoid useless actions in a situation where he might have to run soon. He gritted his teeth and looked forward. At least 200 people were packed tightly in the narrow space. Considering all other elements were orderly, this was clearly a deliberately created obstacle. Just as he was wondering whether to push forward, a transparent hand appeared on Sal's arm. And a moment later, the green-eyed, black-haired girl reappeared next to him with a slight frown and grinned. Salvatore Argento. 51st floor, room 6. Debt paid, okay. With those words, she turned and ran toward the stairs. Sal followed without hesitation. It was to check which stairs or elevator to take. However, less than 20 seconds later, he realized he was completely screwed. The elevator line was insanely long, and his room was 30 floors down. He had to go down from the 80th floor where he currently was, and considering the distance to come back up to this platform, he had to go up and down a total of 60 floors, plus finding the room and changing clothes. And in a competitive situation where he didn't even know the reason. Sal gritted his teeth and thought, "Can I go slowly?" Sal remembered Pietro telling him not to worry about anything, and Sophia looking at him with proud, yet worried eyes. Those eyes worrying about him, who was always cautious and reluctant to compete with others. "I hate being last, especially if it's a test." He raised his head and looked at the speedster. Activating his ability, the pattern of shining threads gathering in the center of the speedster's chest came into view. Sal had copied his parents' abilities many times, but he had never copied an ability that directly affected the body. The structure is simple. Copying itself is easy. If I don't follow it exactly and tie a few knots to adjust the output. He thought of a method, but couldn't put it into action. Memories of suffering pain after using abilities surfaced. Copying someone's ability was a curse, not a blessing. One wrong move, and he could die without knowing why. Sal's brain was strongly warning that his body was not yet used to such an ability. Just as he was about to give up, a student burst out from the stairs and brushed past Sal. At that moment, Sal remembered what Sophia had said in passing. "I really want to see you in uniform." Sal thought, "Wouldn't I be hard to see if I'm too far behind?" Damn it, I don't know. Sal activated his ability. His silver eyes shone, and countless threads condensed with light unfolded among the students flocking toward the map. Sal picked out what he was looking for from those threads. The speedster's thread bundle had a simple-looking structure. A few threads were tangled with knots that didn't match the ability. Sal wanted to untangle the tangled parts while copying, but he didn't want to increase the risk any further. He held back and copied the threads as they were. After accurately imprinting that form in his mind, Sal began weaving the exact same bundle of threads with his fingertips, even down to a single knot, as if assembling a precise circuit. And he let his own power flow into that circuit. Thump! Everything stopped. Thump! Thump! His heart pounded crazily, but Sal tried to maintain calm as much as possible. His body was completely unprepared for this ability. No training, no adaptation, no resistance. Literally, it was stealing and using someone else's ability by force. It wouldn't be strange if something happened at any moment. But Sal didn't have time to worry about that now. He had to find his room. He lightly increased his speed and started running down the stairs. One floor and another floor. Running down the stairs while exhaling, Sal realized this ability was a bit different from his expectations. A sensation as if the surrounding time had slowed down, while feeling like he was moving at normal speed. Honestly speaking, it wasn't that great. Still, it was a distance that would have normally taken 20 minutes, but now it seemed to take less than a minute. He walked a few times in the middle because his heart beat excessively, but he didn't stop the ability. Since it was a physical-based ability, his whole body would scream tomorrow morning, but there was no worry about essence depletion. The speed ability he was using now was barely touching his internal essence. Sal, having a lot of time to think while moving, suddenly wondered if a day would come when he could handle abilities freely like the green-eyed female student. How comfortable would it have been if he could arrive at the room floating like a ghost? But in his current state, that possibility seemed non-existent. There was a fatal limit to his ability. If he didn't accurately understand how any ability worked, he could be swept away by that power and die. Super speed ability was dangerous too, but since the concept of running was intuitive, it was somewhat better. Finally, he found his room number, took out the key, and touched it to the reader. Because it took quite a while to recognize, he had to hold it there for a long time. Sal opened the door at ridiculous speed, almost breaking all the hinges, but Sal didn't care after seeing the gray uniform lying on the bed. Sal, fearing the uniform would tear, immediately deactivated the ability and looked around the room while quickly taking off his clothes. The room was much larger and more pleasant than he expected. One entire wall was made of glass, giving a view of the entire city at a glance. And in a separate room, there was a work desk and a space that looked like a professional training facility. The bed was generously large, and a luxurious shower was installed in the bathroom. A message was floating on a screen attached to one wall. Welcome to Quest Academy. Your first assignment is already in progress. Your preliminary ranking depends on the order of your arrival. Since we have to evaluate 1,000 students simultaneously, Our faculty must choose who to observe closely. Professors are always watching for outstanding talent to join masterclasses, so please show your distinctiveness clearly from the start. It is much easier to stay on top than to climb up from the bottom. Good luck. Under the message, a mark indicating the welcome party location was floating on the map. After putting on all the uniform, Sal debated whether to stop using the speedster's ability. His body was already starting to ache here and there, and he was soaked in sweat. Even without using the ability, his arrival rank would probably be above average, but there was a thought that kept nagging at the corner of his mind, that his parents would be coming to that welcome party, and surrounded by colleagues and clients at that. Sal would have been sufficient staying in the middle, and his parents would also want him not to overexert himself. But if he showed something exceeding expectations, it wouldn't be bad. He gritted his teeth, ignored the pain spreading his legs, closed the door, and started running again. He activated the ability again and told himself, "It'll be over soon. Just a little more." The fight to climb the stairs again was much harder than expected. Thump, thump, thump. The pounding of his heart grew louder, but Sal had hardened his resolve. Thoughts of giving up crossed his mind countless times on the way, but he steadied himself by imagining his parents' surprised faces when he made it into the top 2 or 300. Just imagining that allowed Sal to speed up more. Running up several stairs at once, he realized he was floating slightly in the air every time he jumped. For the next few sets of stairs, Sal moved by bouncing off the floor once, and then rising as if floating, then turning direction on the next step to adjust acceleration again and fly. This significantly reduced his physical fatigue, and he still had energy left when he arrived back at the lobby. He ran, gaining speed as he was, and using the newly learned acceleration, he shot out of the lobby and threw his body toward the welcome venue. Some people overtaken by Sal exclaimed, "What was that just now? Is there another speedster?" Every time Sal strode forward, his heartbeat slowed down, and his steps became more natural. He rested naturally in the short moments of gliding through the air. Whether this was his body adapting to the ability, or simply his mind going hazy from exhaustion, Sal couldn't be sure. Without a moment to think further, Sal arrived at the destination. Cheers from parents and guardians supporting their children rushed in. Sal deactivated the ability, but couldn't reduce the entry acceleration at all. Eventually dragging his feet and sliding across the floor, he slowly stopped in the center of the event hall. Sal was tormented by shame, but pretending to be calm somehow, he looked around to find his parents. He desperately hoped he wasn't too late. Salvatore Argento. The headmaster spoke with a voice ringing through the venue and pointed to the ranking board on the stage. Sal's name was displayed there. His parents weren't visible, but a group of upperclassmen in black uniforms with colorful color patterns on each shoulder sent thunderous applause toward Sal. They were second and third year students, and the sound of their applause overwhelmed the cheers of the adults. Unable to even move his body, Sal just sat there until sensation returned to his legs. He lifted his head and looked at the ranking board, and for the second time that day, he felt like time had stopped. Rank 42, Salvatore Argento. Sal walked between the tables, receiving constant congratulations from people he was seeing for the first time. 42nd. That was incredibly flashy. You were the best among the speedsters. Vite, Argento. Argento is 42nd. His name was displayed on the giant ranking board, but he had absolutely no idea who the people congratulating him were. In one corner of his vision, a few other students wearing gray uniforms were also receiving similar praise. He wasn't sure if he should be standing with them, but Sal decided to just wait until someone gave him instructions. The welcome venue was a huge space that looked like a remodeled gymnasium. 2 walls were decorated with seats for current students who were busily conversing. The fact that so many people were looking at him was still unfamiliar and uncomfortable. Whenever a new name was announced, Sal applauded. Now the order was passing the 100th rank, and the audience also seemed to be gradually losing enthusiasm for clapping. The reaction had already died down around rank 30, but people said the atmosphere revived thanks to Sal's slide. Passing through the people, Sal smiled and accepted greetings, but kept looking for his parents. However, amidst that, the words some people said while holding on to him grated on his nerves. With 42nd place, you won't be doing supporter work. Argento. Argento is 42nd. Salvatore. You are not meant to be a supporter. It was advised to join offensive class instead of being a supporter. It turned out that the Argento family was regarded as synonymous with the supporter class within the Academy. People were strangely unhesitant in telling Sal not to follow that tradition. If he heard a little more, he felt he would get sick of it. Is there such a shortage of offensive heroes fighting on the front lines? Or do supporters look useless? Whichever it was, Sal started to get angry on behalf of his parents. Currently in this world, the Argento auction house was an indispensable existence. Could they even know what the weapons they use could do without proper appraisal? Who repairs the equipment? What about barrier maintenance? Sal recalled all those reasons one by one in his head and was seething inside. Just then, his father Pietro finally found him. Sal, before he could even say a word, His father hugged him tightly and smiled broadly. Let's go quickly. Your mother is trying to marry you off. Apparently, a childhood friend's daughter entered this time. So come quickly. He couldn't distinguish if it was a joke or a threat, but Sal put strength into his throbbing legs and started following his father, who was smiling brightly. Pietro didn't lose his bright smile, even toward people cracking jokes. Seeing that, Sal thought he did well to push himself running to the finish line. The Argento family was not a member of high society in the true sense. They were merely necessary outsiders invited only when their ability as appraisers was needed. They were often called to events, but their seats were always at the outer tables. Rather than being ignored, it was a formal courtesy to save face. Maybe that's why the hollow praise and hypocritical words from people around him now felt even more disgusting to Sal. His parents were used to such social life, and Sal was too, to some extent. That didn't mean he liked it, though. All right, we're here. Cynthia, this is Sal. I told you I'd find him properly soft. Pietro gestured and introduced Sal to a woman. Cynthia was the exact opposite of his mother Sophia. If Sophia had a small and elegant atmosphere, Cynthia was not at all. Sal held her hand and smiled warmly. Nice to meet you, Cynthia. Instead of answering, Cynthia smacked Sophia's arm and said, Oh my God, he has the exact same eyes as Pietro. Is he really your kid? At the following sharp laughter, Sal could understand why everyone hurriedly came to find Sophia. They had to rescue her. But Cynthia didn't stop there. Still holding Sal's hand, she continued. Our Tabitha will be here soon too. I really want you two to meet. She hasn't arrived yet. She was always a slow kid, but she's a smart child. Sal couldn't tell at all if she was putting her daughter down or boasting about her. Anyway, since he was reluctant to awkwardly encounter a mini version of Cynthia, he excused himself saying, I'll go to the restroom for a moment. Pietro sent a look of understanding, and Sophia had an expression begging him to please come back. Even though he was already about 10 steps away, Cynthia's booming voice could be heard. If I were 20 years younger, I would have made a move first. Sal ignored the pain in his legs and started walking faster in the opposite direction. Walking hurriedly, he bumped into a tall blonde man. Sal stumbled as he lost his balance, but hurriedly apologized while catching the man falling backwards to help him not fall. The man straightened up, looked around guardedly, and met Sal's eyes. At that moment, Sal's ability flinched momentarily. It meant someone had used an ability on him. Paha! Then the man suddenly burst into laughter. Sal was bewildered. He tapped Sal's shoulder with one hand and wiped away tears with the other. Apology accepted. I was trying to see if you were sincere, but I didn't expect to see a face traumatized by Cynthia, he said while laughing. Telepath. Only then did Sal realize he was the telepath, Neuro, and burst into laughter with him. Could you possibly erase the last 20 minutes entirely? I want to forget everything from Cynthia's dizzying words to me sliding all the way. Contrary to Sal's expectation, Neuro stopped laughing and made an unexpected expression. Are you that kid from the Argento family? Hesitating for a moment, not knowing how to answer, Sal held out his hand. I am Salvatore Argento. Everyone just calls me Sal. Neuro regained a smile and accepted the handshake. I'm Nil. Everyone calls me Neuro. Only after shaking hands with one of the most powerful superhumans in the world did Sal realize that this was no longer the silver sanctuary blocked from outsiders. Sal couldn't tell if his legs were trembling because of the meeting just now, the speed he ran at, or because he really needed to go to the restroom. As time passed, the atmosphere of the space softened considerably, and the joyful conversations and intermittent applause heard from everywhere had cooled down much more than when Sal arrived. It was quite embarrassing to see the dejected faces of students arriving late, but Sal suddenly thought that this entry ranking itself might be a device to test the students psychologically. Was this perhaps a mental strength test? He cursed inwardly and scolded his brain to please stop thinking. Going to the restroom came first right now. Arriving at the restroom, he found an empty stall, sat down for a moment to catch his breath, and felt the greatest satisfaction, but this didn't last long. An annoyed voice rang out from the sink area. It's really fucking ridiculous. It definitely cheated, right? But his name went up on the ranking board anyway, damn it. Sal shook his head with a frown. Speaking ill of someone openly in a public place like this where anyone might be listening, just how stupid are they? But you know, too, who he is. Hey, what can those people do? Only annoyed sighs were heard. Sal thought it would end here, but that voice full of complaint still had room to pour out more hatred. Just imagine he used that ability. Let's say he mind-controlled students to clear the way or blocked them from getting first place. Then what could people say? Some auction houses devalue items or cheat. There is nothing more foolish than that. However, the owner of that voice is raising his own value and devaluing others. There isn't even any basis. Sal, who intended to just listen quietly, ended up snickering at that absurd sophistry. Instantly, silence flowed in the restroom, and soon after a bang sounded as someone hit his stall door hard. What's funny, you bastard? Sal finished up, flushed the toilet, and turned the handle to open the door. Standing in front of the door was a student with a small but stocky build. He was glaring with his chest puffed out and a face full of anger, but Sal had no intention of backing down at all, and suddenly became curious. What rank did you get? 67th, he shouted, pointing to the hall behind. Since 67th wasn't a bad rank, he spoke with some pride. But if it weren't for that bitch, I would have been much higher. Sal shook his head from side to side, past him, and stood in front of the sink. Then he said, while washing his hands, I was 42nd. I didn't see anyone mind-controlling, and there was no one lining up. In my opinion, it just sounds like you're looking for someone to blame. But if it were me, Sal turned his head and looked at him with a serious expression. If it were me, I would absolutely never pick a fight with someone who mind controls. What if she tells you to jump out the window? The student hit the door hard again. I won't fall for it again. I can resist. Just as Sal rolled his eyes and tried to leave, a fist struck beside Sal's face. It was more surprising than painful, because the opponent's posture and angle were awkward from extending his fist above his own height. Sal quickly activated the speedster's ability. Although it was gradually fading from memory now, the remaining residue was enough. Right now, he didn't need super speed, just time to think was enough. As the movements of the two men slowed down, Sal calmly observed the opponent. Sal wasn't a fighter, but he knew basic physics and biology. The opponent was full of holes, and his weaknesses were exposed as is. His posture was terrible, and it would be over if Sal applied pressure to just the right spot. Sal slowly turned off the ability and moved his body, lifting his right foot slightly and sweeping it to the left toward the leg the opponent had extended. The opponent completely lost his balance and stumbled. By the time his surprised eyes widened, Sal's right hand appeared beside his face. The other male student beside him stared blankly as his friend's head hit the floor with a bang, and he lost consciousness just like that. Ush! Hands and legs! A heavy pain spread through Sal's hand and leg, but he stared silently at the remaining male student for a moment before leaving the restroom. Fortunately, that student didn't follow him. Coming out into the hallway, Sal took his fingers off his face. Wondering if a bruise had formed where the fist hit, Sal blamed himself while inwardly cursing his own foolish act. If he said he made an enemy from the first day, his mother would surely worry. Since visits would be difficult for the next few months, she would surely lose sleep worrying that her son might be in danger. He picked up an empty glass, placed on a nearby table, and held it up to see his reflection, but it was useless. That's completely empty. Shall I fill one up for you? A voice was heard cheerfully from nearby. When Sal looked up, a dazzlingly beautiful woman with dark reddish-brown hair was holding her own glass. I'm on my way to get a drink too. What's difficult about bringing one more? But wait a minute. Her blue eyes narrowed thinly. Are you old enough to drink? Before Sal could answer, a playful smile bloomed on her face. Doesn't matter. I was going to bring it anyway. Let's keep it a secret between us two, okay? Sal tried to protest, but she had already disappeared into the crowd. He stood blankly for a moment, and just as he was about to wonder who she was, he felt a light touch tapping his shoulder. Turning around, a staff member wearing a white uniform was standing there. Sal spoke up quickly. I wasn't trying to drink alcohol. I was trying to check my reflection with the glass. Sal lifted the glass and pointed to the blurry reflection. You see? I was wondering if I got a bruise. The man in white clothes raised his hand to quietly stop him and smiled gently. No, it's fine. I didn't come because of that. If you want to drink, you can drink as much as you want. And there's no bruise on your face. Must have been quite a weak punch. At the opponent's smile, Sal relaxed a little and put down the glass. But soon he noticed the situation was strange. Sal gave a bitter smile. But I didn't mention a punch. Looking at the white uniform, the thought crossed Sal's mind that he might be expelled before even entering. I might have been a bit excessive, but it was self-defense. Really? Sal waved his hand and spoke as if making an excuse, but at that moment, something heavy was placed in his right hand. The reddish-brown-haired woman from before had appeared again. Her eyes sparkled, and her arm was already resting lightly on Sal's shoulder. You hit someone? She looked at the man in the white uniform, and he bowed deeply in greeting. Alarm bells rang in Sal's head. He could be expelled. He knocked someone out, and now he had even accepted a drink from a woman whom people were bowing to. While he was struggling to process the whole situation, the woman laughed heartily and took a long sip. I never imagined an Argento could throw a punch. How was he? She asked the man in the white uniform. He spoke as if evaluating Sal highly, with his head still bowed. He pinpointed the opponent's weakness accurately and knocked him out in less than a second. There were no punches thrown. The woman took another sip of her drink, and this time fixed her gaze completely on Sal. Then she signaled the man in the white uniform to withdraw with a hand gesture. Surprisingly, the man bowed politely and withdrew quietly. Sal was left alone with her in an instant, and his heart began to beat like crazy. It felt like being exposed to a predator's gaze. The air pressed down heavily, and an invisible force pressured him from all sides. Just before a terrible sense of fear covered his whole body and his knees gave way. Suddenly, all the pressure disappeared, and her smile returned. Your ability is quite interesting, little Argento, she said with a smile, but it's still at the level of a baby tiger. Only then did she move her gaze from Sal's face, and Sal felt a sense of liberation, as if he had barely escaped from tiger's teeth. The woman put her glass down on a nearby table and took out a bundle of metal cards from a pouch on her thigh. She glanced at Sal one more time, then looked at the cards with eyes that seemed to be measuring something. The moment her right hand moved in a flash, a dagger popped out of thin air and landed with a smack in her palm. Sal was startled and took a step back. She spun that dagger between her fingers and looked up at the ranking board. By the way, why is your name so hard to write? Watching her engrave his name onto a bronze card, Sal eventually couldn't overcome his curiosity and activated his eyes. Although his mind was already close to its limit, he wanted to appraise that dagger. Appraisal was much more difficult than expected. That meant the grade of the sword was considerably high. Sal focused more energy into his eyes, and upon seeing the result, he inadvertently inhaled. Epic Ethos Blade. It was a legendary weapon that Sal's father had barely appraised 1 year ago, and even now boasted about how long that appraisal took. The client back then was also the Reavers Guild. As Sal flinched and inhaled, the woman stopped writing and looked back at Sal. What? Name? Ethos Blade. Origin? Portal Artifact. Age? Unknown. Grade? Epic High. Dimensions? Total length 12.75 inches. Blade 8 inches. Handle 4.75 inches. Material? Fong of Gloomhusk, Heart of Voider, Hellfire Titanium. Attributes: unstoppable. Can attack, ignoring all defensive measures except Gloomhusk Hide. Manifestation: can hide or reveal the weapon according to the user's will. Summon: weapon is summoned immediately to hand within the user's visual range. Possessed ability: instoppable manifestation summon. Power source: external essence. Evolution potential: none. Quality best. Durability: 93%. Estimated value: $85,000, $145,000. Sal shut his mouth, fearing he might say something nonsensical, and shook his head as if it was nothing. The woman tilted her head slightly, then twirled the dagger in her hand. I just felt a wave of quite strong energy from you. And then you suddenly inhaled. What was it? Her tone was affectionate, but her face was not at all. Sal flinched and pointed the dagger. Epic Ethos Blade. It can cut anything, except for Gloomhusk scales, but she still stared at Sal expressionlessly. It meant to keep talking. Sal flinched in discomfort and gulped. There was only one Ethos Blade in the whole world, and the Reavers Guild requested the appraisal themselves. So, I thought perhaps you might be Vila, the Vice Guildmaster of the Reavers Guild. Sal struggled to avoid her eyes, but breaking eye contact was almost impossible. She looked at Sal silently, then suddenly crushed the bronze card she was holding. Some people around turned their heads at that sound, and Sal thought, I'd rather go back to when Cynthia's remarks and the sliding were my worries. A moment later, a smile appeared on her face again, and Vila shook her head lightly and laughed as if sighing. She reached back, and this time took out a silver card with a confident look. This time, engraving didn't even take a few seconds. Vila lifted the card lightly to check, then turned back towards Sal. Her smile was somewhat eerie. Think of this as a preliminary contract. She handed over the silver card and continued. A proposal for a potential alliance that would be beneficial to both parties, shall we say. She left a wink and headed toward another section of the crowd again. Her card pouch was completely hidden inside her dress before he knew it, and the dagger also disappeared without a trace. Sal stood there as if frozen. Then he felt a familiar presence beside him. Pietro approached, whistling softly. It was your first guild negotiation, but you did quite well. Of course, there is some feedback to give. His voice was affectionate, and he pointed to the silver card and said, First, let's go outside and get some fresh air. Sal nodded with a blank expression, the silver metal card still tightly clutched in his hand. Sal inhaled deeply, then looked at his father sitting next to him. He had just frantically poured out everything that had happened since he went to find the dormitory 5 minutes ago. Pietro hadn't been given a single moment to rest, only watching his son pacing around him while making him sit on a bench. When Sal finally finished his story, Pietro carefully raised his hand and gestured as if asking a question. Sal nodded. He was still pacing in circles around the small garden space next to the lobby. Pietro smiled and stood up from his seat. He placed his hand on Sal's shoulder and guided him gently to the bench. Now it's my turn to speak, so I'll do the frantic pacing, and you just listen. Got it? His tone was light and joking, but his expression looked somewhat complicated. Sal looked at him quietly and waited. First of all, if you tell this story to your mom again, you must lie. Say you learned how to use your ability while talking to that girl, or just say you ran really fast on your own. Whatever the reason, it's 100 times better than the fact that you copied and used an ability you knew absolutely nothing about. Pietro relaxed his stiff face a little and continued. That doesn't mean I'm blaming you. It was a creative solution that came out of a difficult situation, and for that alone, it's worthy of praise. However, the problem is that it's an issue that could threaten your life. Pietro's voice contained worry rather than rebuke. Sal knew those words were meant to take his side, and felt his father being considerate, so he wouldn't feel intimidated for no reason. I am sorry, Dad. Pietro laughed at those words and offered a warm smile. Fortunately, your mom didn't see your entrance herself, but she heard about it from Cynthia. I heard it was quite dramatic. He shrugged and said, "Oh, and I met Tabitha too. She seemed like a nice kid. Not your type, though." Pietro waved his fingertips playfully near his neck. You don't need to go into detail about what happened in the restroom. Just say you hit his face while moving hurriedly to make the event time after changing clothes. Sal nodded and laughed. It was reassuring to have a father who protected him to this extent and planned defense strategies one by one. Although it was a struggle to prevent his mother's anxiety, the fact that he wasn't worrying alone was sufficient comfort. When he heard that Sal had knocked someone out in the restroom, his father didn't bat an eye. That fact alone meant a lot to Sal. There was no distrust from his father, nor did he question the motive or reason. Pietro just accepted the facts as they happened and was adept at handling them. It was the attitude of an appraiser. At the sound of a finger snap, Sal's gaze returned to his father. You don't need to space out. It's almost over. I know you're waiting for the good part, but when you tell your mom, finish it like this. I shook hands with Neuro, and he told me to just call him Neil. Then your mom will be totally moved. Pietro finally pointed to the silver card still clutched in Sal's hand. And the most important point, don't worry about Vila. Her personality is a bit fiery, but she's a decent person. I've worked with her a few times, and I'd gladly do it again if asked. Pietro looked at Sal and continued. Vila used one of her skills on you today. It's her aura skill, originally used to weaken or terrify demons. She modified it slightly to see your reaction. Honestly, I didn't like it. But Quest Academy is different from the world I knew. To evaluate a psychological state, they might consider such a crude test necessary. Anyway, what's certain is that you passed that test and surprised Vila. Pietro sat next to Sal and tapped the metal card. You might not understand well right now, but this is a tremendous compliment. As Sal's eyes widened, Pietro nodded. You probably thought this. Is Vila trying to scout me to the guild? Asking me to go hunting a few times during the semester? Pietro shook his head and laughed. It's nothing like that. This is like a preliminary work contract. Vila officially expressed that she intends to work with you in the future. If she had given you a bronze card, you would become one of their outsourced contractors. A relationship where they entrust appraisal requests or just exchange simple tasks. Pietro tapped the metal token once again. Silver means a priority supplier. Vila told her people to entrust appraisals to you first when new items come in. But why is this such a big compliment? You haven't even worked as a formal appraiser until now. Giving such status to someone like you means they trust your ability very strongly. Pietro continued. Besides, you're at the Academy now, right? Collaboration with the Reavers Guild not only gives you a chance to handle actual work, but you can also receive rewards in the exclusive currency they use. You probably didn't hear because you were going around the dorms, but Headmaster Quest explained it to us. There's an internal economic system here, a structure that rewards those who make an effort. Pietro hugged Sal with one arm and tapped the card again. Don't be tied down by class. Your mother and I are supporters, but that's not all you are. Through this token, you can earn money with your talent and build expertise in a field you truly feel passionate about. You are special. You can pick any skill you see at the Academy and copy it exactly, right? But you and I both know. That's not all. Sal stared intently into the eyes of the same color looking back at him. The gaze that had consistently watched over him from the moment his memory began. Is becoming number one really what's important? Do you want to win the war? Do you want to reclaim lost territory? Or if not that, do you want to save someone's life? Pietro stood up from his seat, brushed off his pants, and concluded. If it's the path you chose, whatever it is, Sophie and I will support our son until the end. Sal exhaled slowly and stood up from his seat. Thank you, Father. My hair was a bit foggy, maybe because of that aura skill. It was an embarrassing moment. At times like this, it's good for both parties to naturally switch to another topic. Sal looked down at the silver card in his hand, realizing its weight only now. But suddenly a question arose. But Dad, if silver is a priority supplier, does the Reavers Guild have exclusive rights to my appraisal requests? Pietro laughed loudly. Just like my son. Absolutely not. I'll explain why. Saying that, Pietro took Sal back into the lobby. A proud smile was spreading around his eyes. The ranking board blinked a few times, announcing that all students' entry had been confirmed. The waiting audience also realized that fact, and finally, the last applause erupted. This time, it was applause filled with genuine relief, with no one clapping forcefully. Numerous staff members in white uniforms came out carrying champagne on trays and began a celebratory procession, and Headmaster Quest went up on stage. Congratulations to all new students. The preliminary ranking is all complete. And starting now, I would like to inform you of a few facts that we did not mention before. For fairness, we gave everyone the same assignment. The reason was simple. It was to see if your motive for arriving here was pure. In fact, it was a competition with much more at stake than what was initially informed. Some of your guardians may have already told you. Quest Academy operates its own currency system. Inside these towers, The wealth you brought or your status outside is of no use. Instead, we use Q credits. Basic accommodation, meals, and class materials are all provided, but Q credits are required for all additional activities such as hunting, external practical training activities, purchasing crafting materials, using specific equipment, or buying better gear. And the most important thing is that Q credits are desperately needed at the beginning of the semester, because you can purchase seats for classes with limited capacity using Q credits. For example, let's say Fury from the Inferno Guild visits to hold a special lecture. We would only be able to accept a few hundred people for that lecture. Then what do? You purchase that seat precisely through Q credits. Sal looked at the dejected faces of students who received low rankings. The comfort and sense of security gained through self-rationalization all became meaningless the moment they couldn't meet Fury of the Inferno Guild in person. To Sal, Fury had been one of the coolest heroes in the war against demons since he was young. That's why missing this opportunity was bound to be painful for anyone. At that moment, Sal sincerely thanked his own brain for enduring the super speed skill to the end amidst that dizzying pain. That is just one example. If you gather enough Q credits, you can also register for specialization courses to take advanced classes. We already explained skill implantation to you. Now I think we should tell you about skill imprinting as well. Skill imprinting consumes a lot of Q credits, but it helps you turn ability you already possess into a fixed ability. Was there any student who found it hard to control their own ability? Through imprinting, that ability will feel like your instinct, just like breathing and blinking, naturally and obviously. The moment they heard those words, more than 1 or 2 students were stirred. Sal understood that reaction better than anyone, because it was a problem he had fought all his life as far as he could remember. Headaches that came when he saw too many people's abilities, sunglasses he always had to wear to avoid accidentally activating his ability, and above all, the terrible fear that always followed him, that he could kill himself if he wrongly copied a destructive ability. But now this imprinting system right in front of his eyes was an opportunity to overturn all of that. Sal's mind began to race uncontrollably. How much would it cost? What did he have to do to get imprinted? He had to know right away. Materials summarizing various systems and price lists, along with everything explained this evening, will have been distributed in each dormitory room. Now, what I want to tell you is the fact that Quest Academy has now transitioned to a much more competition-centered environment. As I already told you, we cannot provide skill implantation or imprinting to every student. To win the war, we must invest the best resources in the best talent. Then, how can we distinguish the real best? Through this evening, we were able to confirm that not all students move with the same motivation. Since there are as many as 500 students who received attention and recognition from the faculty, being recognized doesn't necessarily mean being the best. So for the first time in Quest Academy history, we have introduced an elite class, the Savior class. This name is taken from the first-generation heroes who first endured sacrifice for the survival of humanity. We now intend to cultivate the next generation of saviors. Only 30 students in the elite class. Selection is scheduled to take place at the end of the first semester. Selected students will be provided with skill imprinting for free and will receive training for the skill implantation they desire. The Savior class breaks away from the career path structure that existing classes must follow. They can take any class helpful for development, and specialization courses exclusive to Saviors are also provided. During this moment right now, an equal opportunity to enter the Savior class is given to all of you. Murmurs erupted from all directions. Everyone wanted to know more about this new Savior class. Sal caught several displeased expressions in the audience, especially in the section where upperclassmen were sitting. They were bound to be disappointed, of course. The fact that such an opportunity wasn't given to them must be unfair. Just as he was thinking that, Headmaster Quest continued, as if reading Sal's mind or accurately grasping the atmosphere of the room. Our goal is to invest as many resources as possible in the next generation of heroes. But that absolutely does not mean we are turning away from the students currently enrolled. As mentioned earlier, 30 Savior spots are given to the first years, 15 for second years, and only 5 will be selected for third years. Also, at the end of every year, the Quest Academy Showcase where your families are invited will be held. In this event, we will showcase the students' growth process, and opportunities to challenge higher rankers will also be given. The Savior class is also included in this challenge, but applicable students are limited to the top 100 in overall ranking. Please refer to the materials placed in the dormitory rooms for detailed information regarding duels and challenges. Finally, before concluding this evening's announcements, there is one thing I want to request of you. Quest Academy has a strict code of conduct. Acts violating this will not be tolerated in any case. Headmaster Quest looked up at the ranking board. There, a single name was noticeably highlighted. It was rank 67. Sal remembered that he was the student who hit him in the restroom, and his breath hitched. The name at rank 67 began to slide down the ranking board and fell all the way to the end. At the same time, the rankings of the rest of the students went up by 1 slot. Quest smiled warmly toward the crowd and said, I told you, this is strictly just a preliminary ranking. We said we would watch you very closely, and we actually did. Simultaneously with those words, the leaderboard fluctuated. Some names jumped over ranks and shot up, while other names tumbled down. The fluctuation range was so large that it was overwhelming just to keep up with the order. Sal gave up on watching the leaderboard and looked around instead. While everyone was looking up, only one person was looking straight into his eyes. It was Vila. With a bright smile, she gestured toward the leaderboard. Sal raised his hand awkwardly and greeted her. Today, we invited some special guests to check the new talent here in person, and some of them left a deep impression on them. On the other hand, there were those who brought disappointment. Of course, there will be more opportunities in the future. But what applies from this moment on is the new preliminary ranking. Everyone worked really hard. Your ranking directly affects the amount of Q credits that will be paid to your dormitory account soon. Guardians, thank you sincerely for being here with us today. Now please say your goodbyes, because in a few hours, all the children here will begin their journey to become heroes. Sal didn't even notice his mother hugging him. The same went for the moment Headmaster Quest left the stage. His gaze was completely fixed on a ranking board. Sal's name was at the position Vila had gestured earlier. Sal's ranking had changed. Congratulations on making the top 20, Sal. I had no choice but to raise your rank. Neuro, who suddenly appeared, grabbed his elbow and smiled broadly. Sal spaced out for a moment, then came to his senses and responded with a reflexive smile. But Neuro's words weren't finished yet. If I voted for my daughter, I would have been criticized for bias, but she took first place even without that. Please promise me you two won't kill each other. Sal smiled and shook his head. He tried to look at his daughter over Neuro's shoulder, but Neuro was so tall that it was impossible. Eventually, he spoke with sincerity. Thank you very much, Neil. Neuro soon disappeared, and other parents and students also headed outside one by one to say their goodbyes. Sophia looked at Sal with her eyes wide open. While I was talking with Cynthia for over an hour, you won a contract with the Reavers Guild, and now you call Neuro by his first name. When did my son grow up like this? Shock and joy appeared on her face simultaneously, and seeing that, Sal felt relieved. A moment later, Pietro also approached and shook his head from side to side. Who are you? Where did my son go? He pointed at the ranking board and tried to explain what he meant, but Sal also stood there with the exact same expression. Looking up at the numbers, once again, with disbelief, the ranking really had gone up. Rank 19, Salvatore Argento.